Hello, everyone. We are live here on Instagram once again. Today, we'll be talking about relationships and personal growth, which I have a lot of experience in. I have had a lot of personal growth with relationships. So, I'm going to bring Victoria on.
Hi, Kai.
Hi.
Beautiful. We are live. I'm delighted we're having this chat today. We're going to talk about relationships. So we had two beautiful lives where we had the chance to discuss healing within the Shaktipat tradition and the Shaktipat spiritual practice, to talk about music, but also relationships, which played a huge role in your own transformational journey. From what I've gathered, your journey navigating the entertainment industry. Whoops. Hello, hello.
Trying to adjust my stand.
Nice.
Sorry. I just made a little adjustment and everything. I'm listening. Go ahead and talk.
Yeah, it's just been such an important topic for you.
Yeah.
You discussing just navigating the entertainment industry, navigating your own femininity, right? Meeting different spiritual teachers, different spiritual communities, birthing your children, getting married several times, and then also still being in a beautiful friendship with your past husband, your ex-husband. So there's been so many different stories going on through your own evolution, and I feel it would be very helpful for seekers or practitioners who also are navigating maybe divorces or birthing children, but who are also undertaking those deep transformational spiritual practice and also feel connected to India, feel connected to those traditions, but would like to see how we could integrate the Shaktipat philosophy and that relationship with Divine Mother as we navigate those conflicts, as we navigate those trials and challenges. And just like any challenge, it's always very useful to hear the story of other people who have been through it and who have utilized their tools and those sacred spaces to grow from those challenges. So would you be able to share a little bit more about how Shaktipat helped you transform your relationships? So I know you were in the ashram and there were different phases where you were practicing and also phases where you were also in the world. But could you share a little more how you were witnessing yourself change, right, in different relationships in your life?
Yes. So, boy, so many different things are coming up for me of how I could share about this. So I'm going to get real vulnerable here and just say that this is something I'm still working on just right now. Like I'm right in the middle of working on a really deeply rooted program that I think is a really universal program, belief system. And so I've been deeply negotiating this within myself this month, actually, more deeply, and a lot of stuff is coming up around like past relationship with my guru and other things. So this is a really interesting topic for me today because I can see how far that I have come and releasing this final bit that I'm working on is a huge blessing. And I also see that it's so deeply. So I'm going to say that the belief that came up for me really recently was I'm not worthy of being loved properly. which surprised me. I was surprised that that belief was still in there at first. When it first came up, it surprised me. But then I looked at different aspects of my life, and I can see how it's still affecting me. And I have really been going deeper within myself to see how much I've grown within this and where it's still hanging on. And I'm bringing it up because I think it's very prevalent. And even if like I wasn't aware of it, I wasn't aware of it. I thought I had healed all of that. So I think even if we're not aware of it, I still think it's there, and it stems a lot probably from childhood, that most of us probably weren't loved properly in our childhood. No blame on our parents, but just, they didn't know how to love us properly. They probably weren't loved properly. And so I have grown immensely from that. At the ashram, with the awakening of my Kundalini, a lot came up around relationships for me. And I could see the kind of relationship I had been attracting. And I could also see that I was releasing a lot of that as, the intensity of the Shakti was working within me and clearing me out. There were a lot of things I just wasn't attracted to anymore and I wouldn't put up with anymore. So abusive relationships, for one, physically abusive relationships were done. Like that couldn't happen anymore. I saw that very clearly. The Shakti was just like, no. Even to the point where if I tried to be in one, something would happen. So I couldn't be. So that got released pretty quickly. I think that the psychological or emotional abuse continued, and I didn't see that as clearly. And I think sometimes those lines get a little bit blurry when we're in a relationship like that, because it's hard to know. If we're very critical of ourselves, it's hard to know what is abuse and what is just, constructive criticism. And so I think a lot of times that I would make excuses for someone if there was abuse happening and say, oh, they're just giving me some sort of constructive criticism. As I'm reflecting deeply on this, I'm seeing that. And when I say abuse, I'm not like blaming the other person. It's just the way that the relationship dynamic was happening. For whatever reason, I was still accepting that in my life, and they had, that program within them that they still didn't know how to treat someone in a loving, respectful way. But I feel like this is like that last little bit of clearing out for me to really be able to see purely what is a purely loving relationship, and what does it mean to be loved properly. So someone can say I love you, someone can take care of you in certain ways, but what does it mean to be loved properly? What does it mean to really have someone hold you in that light, in that divine energy? The song that I just wrote, the song called Intimacy, I wrote about that. And I wrote to me what it means to really be held in the divine and in the divine light. And the second verse of the song says, when I wake in your arms and the light within me feels safe and free. So what does it mean to be with someone and for that ultimate divine space within you to be able to express? Can we express the Shakti with someone really deeply and feel really, really safe and really free to express that energy? And then the next part of the verse was the God within you sees the God within me. To me, that's it. That's the perfect relationship. That's the divinely loving relationship. That's being loved properly. And that's what it means to me, to be loved properly and to have that. So it's been a process since the Shakti was awakened. So at first, all kinds of stuff came up around relationships. And I always believe that when we're going through this process of awakening, things are going to come up in our outer circumstance to show us what we still need to work on, and hopefully we'll get it that time and we'll allow the Shakti to work with us and clear that energy out. But sometimes it's going to repeat itself and it's going to come back harder and harder until we finally get it. And but I think allowing the Shakti to do that work with us and to do that clearing with us, then we can move on to the next step. And I had an interesting conversation with someone who showed up on my satsang on Sunday, who I hadn't seen for decades, and he was with my guru. And we reconnected yesterday, and we had about a 2-hour conversation. And he reminded me of a lot of things from that time. Like he didn't actually remind me, but just speaking with him reminded me from a lot of relationship dynamics that I had at that time, including the dynamic I had with my guru. And I realized that even the relationship with the guru, I was still treating in a very unhealthy way. It was codependent. I was looking to him for approval. So even the Shakti was showing me in that way, in my dynamic with him, where I needed to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, that that relationship has ended with my guru on the physical level, not on the astral, because I see that I was playing out unhealthy relationship dynamics with him still, and it's still something. There's a little bit in there. I realized in my conversation with him that I still need to release.
Mm. Yeah, and it's quite frequent as well that uh from interactions I have with people who are very deeply spiritually connected, um not all, but that we do have those trials to undergo when it comes to relationships. It's just I've met a lot of people who just had that very easy sort of like tapped into source very quickly. But I have that as well of just having that journey of grounding and finding roots and just creating those relationships with that consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
With I mean with what we've sort of developed with the practice, and it's just interesting to see the mirroring here between us. I can
Yeah,
relate.
yeah, I know.
I just no comment. Like I can really relate to what you're sharing.
Yeah.
And could you share a little more how Shaktipat and your Shaktipat practice is helping you resolve conflicts and challenges in your relationships? Because, like you mentioned, um, with your gurus, the spiritual teachers, Shakti was showing you, and where it was sort of okay or not okay to pursue, a longer time with that teacher. That was like one aspect. Maybe with your past husband, how do you work with it when things come up? Do you sit and meditate? Do you feel your emotions, or um, what is the type of dialogue you hold with the divine when those things come up? Because we as humans can tend to be very impulsive, like, we have like pulsions, right?
Yeah.
We're, who's kind of like almost animalistic, like,
Hmm.
default mode, like behaviors, reactions, and words. And so, how can a spiritual practice, in your experience, help us um, yeah, just respond in a more conscious way, right? And how is it that we can integrate those goddess practices, those ancient, goddess practices, help us on during these situations?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful question, and something that someone actually recently brought up to me, asking that question because I was saying, Shakti or the Kriyas purify the system, right? They purify the nadis, they purify us on all levels of consciousness. And someone who's been in the practice for a very long time said to me, "Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that the Shakti and the Kriyas purify?" Because I know people who in the 70s were getting these crazy Kriyas and they've done this practice their whole life and they're very dissatisfied with the results.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it was a big question. And I really said, I'm going to meditate on this and I'm going to write a blog on this. The way that I approach it, and it might all be about the approach, because the way that I approach it is I am always open for listening to the Shakti and what the Shakti has to tell me, even if it's really, really hard. So when I personally tune in and ask, and I know that everyone isn't capable of hearing at this level yet. So I'll say what I do and what might be other alternatives. But I always tune in and ask. And I say, where am I in this situation? What do I need to see? What do I need to clear? What do I need to open up to? I know people often reach a certain level and then they think they're done. So they might not go in and do this work where they're still asking, what do I need to clear? What do I need to see? How do I need to grow further? And that's what we've talked about before when it can get dangerous because they're not still looking. But I constantly look. And if I see anything weird in my life, a disruption in a relationship, weird energy coming towards me, anything, I know that I need to look. So I personally will sit with the Shakti and and go inward and just ask. I ask and I pray. And if I'm usually given a direct answer. Like with this one that I'm working on right now, I was told, well, it went from one belief to another belief to another belief. It kept kind of drilling down until it got to this belief that this is something I still need to clear. So I'm actually given the words, and then I will keep meditating on it for as long as it takes until I get to a deeper space with it and I can clear a little more. And Shakti works with me. When I start working on something like this, she's working with me constantly. So she brought a situation back into my life so that I can look at my relationship with my guru. Because I talked to a person and he was with my guru and he even reached out to my guru and told him that we talked and all of a sudden this is back in my world. So I say, oh, this is back in my world because I have to look deeper into what I've asked to clear. So I think it's like paying attention to everything in your life. You don't just go and get the Shakti pot, and have this experience and then walk back into your life and forget about it. You have the Shakti pot, and then your whole life is that. You have to remember that everything that's happening in your life is that. Did someone come up to me and say something I didn't like? That's the Shakti. She brought that person to you to have that experience so that you can look at it. So do I react and maybe I do react, but then later I think about, ooh, I could have done that differently, or ooh, what was I supposed to see in that moment? How did the Shakti want me to respond in that moment? And so I think it's about bringing it into every aspect of your life, never forgetting that the Shakti is working with you. And the Shakti she's not just there with you when you meditate or when you come to, a group meditation. That sparked something in you to start looking at and start clearing. And then also for me, in the middle of the night, the Shakti often wakes me up and I'll just be getting kriyas or something, something that needs to clear in the middle of the night. That's when she likes to work with me the most. So I would say for someone working with relationship stuff, it's hard. It can be so hard because we have really big triggers around relationships, anger, resentment, all that stuff that just, oof, it just grabs you. If you have, and especially if you have one certain person that you always have a certain response to, I know how hard it is. And I've done that work with my ex-husband, and it was so freaking hard. And I know why I've been in the situation with him for so long is because it's been a beautiful situation for me to clear all this stuff, that I can see like it's a direct reflection of how my mom acted. And it was uncontrollable. These moments, they would grab me. My Shakti was in full swing, and yet I would still react to something he said. And now I can see it, but it's taken a really long time and a lot of prayers and a lot of meditating and a lot of up in the middle of the night getting kriyas and, a lot of moments where I had to just yank myself away and say, nope, I'm not going to do it. It's not easy work. So even though the Shakti's working with us, it's not like, I mean, for some people, I guess it happens this way, but for me, it has not been like it's just she yanks it out of you, it's gone, you're done. We have to do the work. We really have to do the work, and we have to be willing to want to do the work and do the clearing.
Mm. Yeah, there has to be a motivation and a desire, I feel. Like, because it's much easier to go back to the default program and to the love of pain and the love of just suffering with it. There's just some sort of love, just love being in those conflicts, subconsciously, because it's the conflicts we're always used to. And I think there has to be a lot of devotion to want to actually alchemize this, because we can always put a blindfold. And I feel that's why situations repeat themselves, because if they weren't repeating themselves, we would just stay in our comfort zone and not evolve. Like, that's just my interpretation. But
Hmm.
um and how do you, sorry, go ahead.
I think also the Shakti brings up the awareness of it because I've seen people in relationships that just yell at each other all the time. And I can walk into the situation and go, oh my God, I can't even be in this energy. They would say that they're not even arguing. Oh, we're not arguing. We talk to each other like this all the time. So I think the Shakti also having the awakening and, that arising of the energy also shows us, it makes us aware, like, oh, this is not okay. You know? So I think it starts bringing an awareness to things that we may not have had previously. And then once you're aware of it, you have to do something about it. You make the decision to change.
Mm-mm. And can how does the Shaktipat work when you actually practice it, either with your partner or either in close relationships? Like, do you know any exercises or meditations that you can engage, like in relationships, may they be romantic or friendly or just community related, that could help that?
Yeah. The beautiful thing I think about being in Shakti in relationship is the closeness is beyond anything we feel in our regular life because it kind of takes all those boundaries away
Mm.
when we're just in our God space. I mean, if we can fully surrender into the Shakti, into the divinity, and we're with another person in that space, and all of the boundaries and all the ego stuff can just melt away in that moment, and we become one with someone, that's the ultimate experience, I would think. I mean, I've had that experience. I've had that experience. So I'm just thinking about when I used to give Shaktipat and my ex-husband and I were together and he would come in the room and he played drums when I chanted. And the Shakti was so in love with his Shakti. So it was like I was experiencing how in love the Shakti was with the Shakti through our bodies. And it created this amazing where like she would be in the goddess mode through me and he would be like in the Shiva mode and she would just be like leaning up against him and just like the divine lovers, just like this beautiful play, and I was just experiencing it. It was like I was watching the relationship of the divine happen through our bodies, which was really amazing. Um, and also, my mother was a difficult person for most of my family to be with. I love her, and I hate to say those words, but it's true. Most of my siblings really had a problem with and I had a problem with my mom. So, but she loved me so much. She was a very devout Christian woman, but she loved me very much, and she would come to my programs, my Shaktipat programs, and she loved what I did. Oh, it was so sweet. She would just sit and she'd get kriyas. I mean, it was the sweetest thing. Yeah. And so I used to work on her a lot individually.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and so she would get headaches. And Shakti seems to be very good with headaches. Like for some reason, I guess it's just the tension that Shakti can pull there when I work with people, can pull the headaches out. So I worked on her a lot. She got migraines when she got migraines, and it always released her migraine. But it also allowed with us. So there was a lot of this, whatever kind of ego stuff going on between her and her kids all the time. But I got to have such a special bond with her because in those moments that I worked with her, all of that was gone. And she was such a high divine being. I don't know why she came here in such a way with such an ego that, annoyed the shit out of her kids. But when I worked with her, I felt her divinity. I saw who she was. And so again, the Shakti was recognizing herself within each of us, and we had this bond. We had a bond that was so beautiful that I feel bad because I don't think any of my other siblings had with her, but it was the Shakti. Shakti's grace that allowed that to happen. So there's something about meditating with someone, being with someone in that space. The more I can bring people into my world of Shakti, uh, the more beautiful my friendships become because we just share something. We share those moments that are perfect, in oneness.
Hmm. Beautiful. And could you share a little more how specifically like the spiritual practice can help us move, beyond our egoic like interactions to express a deeper sense of love? So you mentioned it with your mother, but if we go just a little bit deeper, what else would you like to share about that? Other
It's,
examples maybe, or other examples where you feel like you really like the spiritual practice was helping you sort of deconstruct certain relationships. So you mentioned with your ex-husband, you mentioned with your mother. Are there other examples, or even with your students, if that's okay to share, that you can mention where you felt the spiritual practice was really helping them move beyond those veils and have better relationships and not go back over and over in the loops of the same conflicts and the same
mm,
mirroring, same pain, the karma basically. It's just how the
well,
practice is helping them break through that.
uh, I'm actually going to go back to my ex-husband, the one that I'm still living with, because I finally realized at a point that he wasn't going to do the work that was needed for us to have peaceful communication. Just it wasn't something that he desired. So all I could do was to do more work with myself. And I didn't know where that was going to go, but I knew that that was what I needed to do. Just keep going in and keep clearing and clearing and clearing and clearing. And just even if I could learn how to better deal with it, how to better know how to just be with it in those moments. He's changed. From me doing the work, he has changed. Now, I don't know if he's doing his own work as a result of that or anything else, but he's changed. So our relationship has changed. Um, it's not what I would call perfect, but it's very doable at this point. And the whole journey for me was really about my children. I didn't want them to be in an environment of arguing and um, disruption in the household. So that was my motivation. I have to say though, because you're saying how did it improve your relationship? There are a lot of relationships that have left my life because I've gotten to a point within myself where I said, "Oh, this isn't good for me anymore," and this person isn't really willing to work on it in the way that I feel needs to be worked on. And so a lot of relationships have left my life over the past 10 to 20 years that just weren't good for me. They just they weren't growing in the way that my soul needed to be with someone who was growing. So I think that there's a record, like with Rod, he's always willing to go the step further and say, okay, I'll look at that or I'll do that. Or if I really push it, if it's like, okay, we're just not going to be communicating anymore or we need to do this work, he'll always take a step back. He said, like in the moment, I might have an ego reaction, but I always think about it. He said, I go to my room and I think about it. There are other relationships that did not have that dynamic. And then they felt weird and they just didn't, they didn't feel right and they weren't growing. And so then the Shakti says, it's okay. You can move on. It's okay. You don't have to stay in this relationship because, we think as a spiritual being, we have to be friends with everybody. We have to
Yes.
love everybody no matter what, which I do. I do love everybody no matter what. But do we still have to put ourselves in that dynamic or is something good for us? That's part of the work. And if you grow up in a very codependent environment,
Yeah.
you think think you have to keep going back in and going back in and going.
Oh,
So I do.
so, oh my gosh, that's so true.
It is.
That I know that for sure because I was raised in a very codependent household. Um, my mother was very dependent on my father. But now it's not the case anymore. And I really feel that that can be a pattern for children who were raised in families that, toxic environment because toxicity is the baseline. So you feel like you should, if there's a relationship, you should go back to a toxic relationship because that's where you come from. So your mind is like, wait, but I'm still going there.
Yeah, I
So I like
know.
that you mentioned it because it's a big one.
It's big. I have a thing that I do now though where I just meditate. If I feel like it's going there, because I will always give somebody a second and third chance, if I feel that somebody has wronged me or it's just not going well. So I do a thing now where I just pray. I say to God, Shakti, Mother, I say, if I am not supposed to be in this relationship, if this meeting is not supposed to happen, if this conversation is not supposed to happen, can you please just intervene and make something happen so it won't happen? It
Yeah.
always does. And she will. She'll they'll call and cancel or something will happen.
Yeah.
So I'm a big advocate of prayer and talking to the divine and asking for help. And when I don't know, show me, make it really obvious. That's my prayer now. Just make it really obvious to me so I cannot miss whatever I need to see here.
Mm. That's interesting. Could you share a little more about the prayer practice? Because, it's one thing to say that we pray, but it's like a whole lifelong journey of refining
Mm-hmm.
your prayer practice and refining the way you speak to the divine and communicate with the divine so that you live your life from a place of wisdom and not just chaos
Mm-hmm.
or reaction, right? Unconsciousness. Um, could you just share a little bit more about that prayer practice? Because I feel that could be very powerful for practitioners or seekers who are working on their relationships today, who are doing the Shakti practice, but maybe they're still refining, the way they communicate with her and with Divine Mother and with just this energy of love, right? That
Mm-hmm.
should inform most of our decisions, truly. But it's not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey.
Yeah, Anandamayi, the great saint Anandamayi is coming to mind because she talks a lot about that in her books of just praying to the divine, the Lord, God, whatever word she uses, and asking, and that God can never deny you. If you ask, my guru used to say that it's like a baby in a crib. If a baby cries out for long enough for its mother, the mother cannot ignore the baby. She eventually has to go pick that baby up. And if you cry out for the divine, you will be answered. I mean, you have to be answered. And you might not be answered in the way that you think you need to be answered, but your answer could be an interaction with someone. It could be something that pops up on the internet when you're searching. It could be a message that comes directly to you. I know that a lot of people have trouble hearing or they don't trust. If we do hear something, I think often we don't trust it. Well, how do I know that was really the divine? How do I know that wasn't my own voice? So then you ask for a backup, give me something to confirm what I think you told me. And eventually you do get to the point where you just trust it. You just know. Like I've had enough ridiculous synchronicities that I can't deny it anymore. But in the beginning, when I tell someone to tune into your heart, even if someone says, I don't, how do I know if I should work with you? I say, tune into your heart, ask. And a lot of people say, I have no idea how to tune into my heart. I don't even know what that means. So then you start with a prayer of that. Show me how to tune into my heart. Show me what that means. I mean, we can talk to God from any stage that we're in. And I say God, and I know a lot of people don't like the word God, but I'm just referring to whatever you feel comfortable with. Um, we can talk to the divine from any place, from any stage of our journey. And that's how I met my second spiritual teacher, Danny. I wanted something different than what I was getting from my Shaktipat guru. And I begged and prayed and asked. I think I was praying to Nana Maima actually for another teacher. And Danny came by the most ridiculous synchronistic experience that it couldn't be denied that it was a direct answer from the divine, the way he came into my life. So it's fun to start just experimenting with it and saying, show me something. Show me something that's really good that that I couldn't deny. And then maybe start writing down the synchronicities. Okay, I asked the divine for this and this happened. It's because in our moments of doubt, we go, oh, you know what, it's not working for me. But then if we have all those moments where we can read back and say, oh, wait a minute, this happened, that happened.
And what is your take on interference? Because what I've noticed in my own journey is that I sometimes can really go in this deep states where I'm communicating with, with the divine, with my higher self, or with just maybe other spiritual forces that help me and guide me from time to time. I feel more or less like comfortable with, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of like we know each other. But sometimes I would still take steps that come from my ego, right, and interfere with the responses I'm getting. So I would get like specific responses like, this is not the right time, or before that happens, this is what you need to work on, or be patient, or like all these things, but I wouldn't want to hear. So I would just
Right.
basically jump into like acting in the world, but not listening basically
Yeah.
to those deeper insights. And then that would create more interference, and that would create like another cycle of learning and like messiness, which
Mm-hmm.
is um but from my own experience, I can share it can be difficult sometimes, even if you're here, to actually apply what you hear, because a part of you still wants to learn and experience and
Yeah,
test it. Because
exactly.
otherwise we would live much wiser lives. What do you think about that?
I think that's part of the process. I mean, I don't think I don't think there are any wrong mistakes. So if the divine tells you this is probably the best approach or have patience, I can't tell you for how long I've been being told soon on certain things. I'm like, the hell is soon? You know, you've been telling me soon for 10 years. Like, what is soon? So, sometimes, yeah, we'll hear things that our ego does not want to hear. But if I reflect on it, I go, oh, well, that happened. But what I was told soon 10 years ago actually, was a second ago. And in all of this needed to happen to get me to the place where I was actually ready for that thing that I was actually asking for at the time that I was told soon. And so interference, well, sometimes we just have to have the experience. Sometimes the experience that we choose to go have, even though we were told something else, is the thing that's going to help us to clear the thing that needs to be cleared for the thing that we're asking for, right?
Hmm.
I,
And also be clear on what we want, right? Because when
mm,
things happen that we don't want, we get clear on what we really
yeah,
desire. But sometimes we need to have that pain to just realize it. It's kind of interesting
it
process.
is interesting, but I don't see it as getting off the path. Like, I don't see it like
Yeah.
if you're told one thing and you go do that, I don't see that as going off the path. I see that as part of the path. I see that as part of the journey. I think as long as we're tuned in, we're doing the practice to the best of our ability, that's not being missed. That's the divine sees and is walking through all of it with us. And we're having the experiences. If I hadn't had some of the crazy experiences I've had, I wouldn't be able to work with the people in the way that I'm working with them. Like, I can really relate to what people are going through, because I've had so many crazy negative experiences. And I can say, oh, you're not alone. I've done that too. I've had that experience too.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy because when you held space for me, it was just like so strong. Like no one ever held space like this for me, ever. I
Oh.
really have to say. No, seriously. It's very, no, I'm really being serious. It's just crazy. Like, because there are certain things that you can only emphasize with, like, have empathy towards when you've experienced it. And that's why most healers, and, spiritual teachers who, walk people through deep healing and transformational healing and like experiences have gone through some massive shit and through some massive trials, because otherwise how could they help people? They wouldn't be
Mhm.
able, like, it's just they wouldn't have any empathy towards it because it's not in their reality. So I feel like such a it's such a paradox that our deepest wisdom comes from our deepest problems, like deepest initiation. To me, it is a paradox. We
Yeah,
right?
I know. Yeah, yeah. I think there are certain questions that are unanswered, and we might get little jolts of information or understanding, but some of them, I think, like that are unanswered.
What do you mean some of them are unanswered? What are you
Like
referring to?
why? Like what the paradox of
Oh
that?
yeah.
Like why yeah.
But that's why the mystical path is so paradoxical, because the mystic gets to experience both the divine and his own humanity. And it's just that's why all of life sound like looks so uh like a movie almost. Like it's almost like when you enter the spiritual path, the mystical path, it just seems like everything becomes um like a story to sort of watch and then understand more deeply. And it's just it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you get the insight of what's happening next because you're tapped into source and the source informs you and teaches you, but you're also ignorant and just learning as you go. So it's just this paradox within us.
Well, I love it because you're reminding me of the hero's journey. And that's what every movie is based on. And we love that journey.
Yeah.
We love watching the hero's journey. So it would be kind of uninteresting if we didn't have all of that, right?
Yeah, for
It's a
sure.
beautiful life. It's our beautiful life path. So, I mean, it's why I'm an open book. I talk about everything I go through. I talk about my deep awakenings and stuff I'm still clearing because it's part of the path. It's just part of the path. And everybody who's on the path has to understand that it is part of the path. It's what we are doing here. Everyone has to do it. I mean, maybe
Mm.
everyone. I don't know. I guess there are saints that come in and they don't have to do it, but
Yeah.
the majority of us have to do it.
Yeah. Yes. Um, yeah, and uh, anything you'd like to add on the topic of relationships, and like maybe like a final insight or like aha moment you had, or maybe one of the biggest like insights you received through your spiritual practice, through your Shaktipat practice concerning relationships. Maybe it's for your children, maybe it's with your ex-husband, maybe it's with your family. Like one of the deepest insights that really moved your heart and really brought you to a place of unconditional love. I'd love to hear that because I'm sure there
Okay.
were.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I don't know what that is, but we'll see. But an orb just floated behind you, so I was distracted for a
Okay.
minute. Um, deepest insight around relationships and Shakti. I don't know why this is coming up, but this takes me back to a time when I dated my guru's son at the ashram.
Oh.
And um, and we had some really deep moments together. So I was able to, because we did go into these really deep meditations together. We'd be in the hall and Shakti pot together, and we went through some incredibly deep meditations together. I was able to wow, it was really weird. I was able to directly see into his soul, and if for moments, for split seconds, get an experience of what he was experiencing. And it was so removed from my reality, like really, really different, like one of those freaky kind of moments. Um, it brought up so much compassion within me because we honestly really have no idea what another person is going through. We can't possibly know what another person is going through. And so, like, his whole approach to life was so different than my approach to life, but I was able to see why. I was able to actually see for these moments how he actually experiences the world and where his soul, essentially where his soul is coming from. It's very hard to explain it, but the compassion that came up in me for everyone and everyone's situation was profound. So I can't get into these kind of such and such is an asshole, or, that's a really bad person, or this person's evil. I just can't go there because no one can know where that person is, what that person is experiencing, who that person came here to be, what experiences that person came here to have. So I think that, my experience with him was very profound. And I guess it's because we were in the depths of, this is when my Shakti was first awakening. We were just in the heat of it. We were both having really huge transformational experiences. And that energy was so intense. And then we would be, together in those moments. And I was just able to have these really profoundly deep experiences with him. It didn't end up being, it wasn't supposed to be a long-term romantic relationship. I think it was just an experience that we were supposed to have together to open me up to something.
Hmm. Oh, that's a beautiful story. I'm so glad you shared it. Thank you for answering the question. There's plenty more to come. I'm really happy we're doing those lives because I think it's so important to share our life stories. I think everyone has learned so much through their own individual life path, and especially, coming also from spiritual teachers and healers. There's also like a deeper, like there's deeper sense of depth because also you've walked through that transformation and through those relationships, wanting to dive deeper into the mystery and wanting to understand more of the mystery and wanting to understand more of your own humanity. So obviously the way you experience your relationships was, you had a different angle, right?
Mhm.
Had depth to it. So I'm really glad we got the chance to discuss this topic. Thank you so much for your beautiful answers.
Thank
I'm so glad
you.
it's now recorded so your community can hear it. There were a few people who logged into the video of it live. Just also people I know from France, so it's wonderful.
Okay.
And yeah, I shall see you next Tuesday for our next live, which will cover another topic that I'm still keeping secret for now. We'll just announce
Okay.
it today. And yeah, and have a nice evening, and I
Thank
shall
you.
see you tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.